I would like to call the meeting to order at 7:05. And before we do our Pledge of Allegiance, I want to remind people that today is June 6th, the 79th anniversary of D-Day. And in June 6th, 1944, that's one of the most remarkable days in world history and one of the greatest invasions. I'd like to take a minute and just read a statement by historian Stephen Ambrose, the author of Band of Brothers, about D-Day and the Greatest Generation. At the core, the American citizen soldiers knew the difference between right and wrong, and they didn't want to live in a world in which wrong prevailed. So they fought and won, and we, all of us, living and yet to be born, must be forever profoundly grateful. And we are. So let us remember those who paid the ultimate price so that we could be free. And at that point, could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. I do know we have some of our members are on vacation since this is June and they're in their journeys coming back, so we wish them safe travels. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda as presented?
Nothing here?
I did have a question for the committee. I think you were all given forwarded an email with a resume from a student from the high school who has inquired to be the liaison from the high school to the committee. And since we don't have meetings in July or August, and we'd like to have a liaison start like in September at our September meeting, would it behoove us at this point in time to add this approval of the liaison to our agenda and then forward that to the township board?
I think that would be appropriate. So
moved.
Support?
Support. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the high school liaison that has been forwarded to us from the schools, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good, thank you. So I will contact the person and we'll go and I will send a letter to the township indicating who the individual is at this point. Is there a motion to approve the agenda then as we have?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Mr. Bloetscher,
Second.
second by Ms. Weeks. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? We have no presentations this evening, although Lori, our Grosse TV person, has also indicated that it might be great when Pam Frucci is back to have her world travels, have a travel log and experience all the different ecosystems that she was able to visit in her journey around the world. So we may take her up on that suggestion, and we would be certainly looking forward to that and hoping to see Pam soon. I know, so that might be a presentation that we would look forward to. I do know that you received, and hopefully you received, the minutes of our May 2nd meeting. And I know, thank you, Mr. Geist. Apologies to Mr. Geist for not doing as able of a job perhaps as he did. But it was it's hard to run a meeting and take notes at the same time sometimes. So,
I'm quite appreciative that you
but
did
if
that.
you would take a minute or two, look over the minutes from our May 2nd meeting. And I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 2nd meeting as presented.
So move.
So moved by Mr. Geist,
Support.
support by Mr. Bloetscher. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Good, thank you. Thanks for being here, Ray, appreciate it. We have some discussion items this evening, and we were trying to get everybody together prior to this meeting to have an after-action review on our dump the junk. But again, just to maybe tell the viewing audience and the audience here that this was probably one of the best dump the junks that we have had since certainly that I've been aware of. We had 555 cars visit, and again, some made multiple visits. We made sure that 99 tires did not go into the open space areas. We were able to fill 15 dumpsters, large dumpsters, that were provided by Priority Waste. And it seemed like concrete and wood seemed to be the going donations, if you would, for that time period.
Coincidentally, that's what you find in the open space.
That's what you also find in open space most often, okay? All three of those items, tires, concrete, and wooden products. So any comment or any, if we're going to be looking at a fall open space greenways, dump the junk, find a treasure, again, maybe like in late September as opposed to early October, because I know the GROSSE Education Foundation has a very big fundraising event on that Saturday, and that will be hopefully people will be attending that rather than getting ready for that. But any comment or any observations from our last dump the junk event?
I guess my question would be the coordination between the dump to junk timing and the church sale. Was that better or the same in terms of having it on the same weekend? I think was the first, or not very often we have it on the same weekend. We
Yeah,
usually
right.
have it right before.
Mm-hmm. Correct. You want to comment about that, or anybody? Personally, I don't think it had a tremendous impact, only from the standpoint, like we were originally thought that was a great idea last year. It was perhaps after COVID. The timing of it, like, hey, what we can do, we can bring some of the excess treasures and bring it to them, and they can turn around and sell it and be used for charitable purposes. But the timing, it got to a point, I think, that in having worked and gone through the St. James Episcopal rummage sale, they had more than enough, and they could not take any of ours. So as it was, we had Chaos Community Services, which we have been very lucky, I think, in some ways, to come here with Reverend Sue Patu comes and brought the box truck and took whatever that's being selective perhaps, but took whatever she could. So I don't think the timing necessarily is important. Like, we got to worry about whether there's going to be a rummage sale, or we have to worry about that, because I think they can handle that on their own, and they have more than enough. That's just my observation on that. But again, I'm looking at trying, so and even if it's not late September, it may be like the second week of October, but sometimes, because the weather's still pretty decent, but somewhere in the fall, we certainly want to come and do another one. My question is that since we've done one now in May, do we necessarily need to get more dumpsters, okay, and acquire that? Because, they come at a cost. I mean, there's, Priority Waste brings them, but we also, we pay for them. So it's a question of, do we need more, or?
I think one comment was the dumpsters seem to be shorter. So, I mean, maybe the same number of dumpsters, but taller sides.
Right.
Because they were lower volume dumpsters
Yes.
this year.
I think that
You
could
also
be,
got to keep in mind, if you have higher sides, it's gonna be more difficult to throw some of the stuff into it. So I think that might have been one of the reasons behind it, so.
Well, I think on
Maybe
the,
a
maybe the
mix.
heavy ones on
Right.
maybe a concrete or something, but, they all open in the back,
Well, I
so.
think they, part of the issue is you still have weight limits on the bridge that we have to be aware of, and Priority Waste does too. And I think they purposely, is it, what, a 20-yarder, 30-yarder, 40-yarder or something? So these may have been like 30 yards, some of the shorter ones were 30-yard ones, and the other ones, larger ones, are 40.
Sure.
I think if you load up a 40-yarder with concrete, you're gonna run into some
Sure.
issues with the bridge weight restrictions.
But maybe the
But-
bigger ones for like the wood or something like that.
Right, because that was, we got to a point where it's like, hey, we have to, we got to do something, we got to put it somewhere. And normally we have just one set aside for, the cleanup afterwards, but that didn't
Yeah,
happen.
because, once you cross-contaminate them, then you defeat its
Oh,
purpose
right,
of
yeah,
separating
exactly,
them, so.
yes, no,
Maybe, an arrangement where you have, a spare in the back or something, if you don't use it, then you don't
don't
pay
use
for it.
right, yeah, I'm sure we could work something out like that.
That's probably a good idea, have more capacity, whether it's more dumpsters
Right.
or a few larger ones. Just to be prepared.
Carl, what's your take
Yeah,
on it?
I think the number is probably good, recognizing that this number, as you highlighted, was the largest by far. Previously, I think we had about 450, 440 vehicles. So this was a 25% increase. I've got to believe some of it is some of the pent-up demand with trying to do projects now that we are moving out of COVID. I think the numbers would be good. They are fairly expensive to bring in, but I look at that as an aberration. If we approach 500 in the fall, then I think that would be, it'd be great that we're not having that stuff in the woods, and we're providing a service. On the other hand, I think we're all very cost conscientious, and I'm not sure that we're going to approach that number with any degree of confidence for the fall.
Maybe not, but the other thing I was wondering afterwards is that I don't know if it's publicized better or people are more aware of it, and so they're taking advantage of it because they know about it. So that's the other thing. too,
Weather
I'm wondering
dependent
is-
as well.
Yeah,
too.
it's weather dependent too,
Yeah.
so you know how that goes.
There's tons of factors in it, but I think, I would ask the question of, if you spotted some, do you pay for them, or can they spot them for the weekend?
Right, and if we don't use them, we don't use them, and we don't have to pay for them, right?
Certainly it seems to me there would be a tipping fee when you're talking about spotting if they're empty.
Yeah, it depends on,
Simply don't have the tipping fee over at
Right.
Riverview, but again, what's the cost? And
it depends on, what their laydown area is. It's, if they have use for them here on the island where it prevents them from having to bring extra over, and
Right.
they got them sitting
I mean,
here
that might
already.
also, the township may be using it too, right? If they have other projects to go, so
Right.
it's like, okay, if we don't use this, then,
Right.
right,
I'm sure there's some coordination there.
work with that.
yeah, and you've worked with Donna on that, Bill,
Yes,
quite a bit,
yeah.
and
Donna Deppa has been great, and again, I can't stress enough about the good work of Donna Deppa and John Kime and George Marks and Rob Ponder in the work and, getting that stuff done.
Yeah, I mean,
And all our
you wouldn't be
volunteers.
talking, 5 or 10 of them. You're just talking 2, maybe
No,
3.
like 2 extras, I would think, something like that. The other thing I think we also noticed is that there was maybe not so much scrap this time, so we may be able to cut back on one of those. We only need one of those, okay, as opposed to 2, and then we can go for, although it depends how, that fills up too, so it's like, the other thing is, ain't broke, don't mess with it, so it's like, it seems to be, and it's, nothing succeeds like success, and I think that's what we want to continue to do, and we really appreciate the community involvement in taking advantage of a program like this, so anything else on the Dump to Junk? But yes, it was a great event, and we'll look forward to another one.
It also helps that if we can partner with somebody, like you said, Cass Community Services, somebody to be able to take some of the leftover treasures if it
Right.
meets their needs in that, because otherwise it gets trashed. So if there's some way that somebody else can take advantage of any of the extra stuff, that is an additional benefit
Right.
to everyone too.
I think it might be beneficial to ask Reverend Sue and perhaps the Monroe County area of Habitat for Humanity what they're looking for, because there were assumptions I know that have been made in the past. There was an organ that was dropped off late in the day, and I thought that thing would go in about 10 seconds, and it is still available. It is
Still
still
sitting there.
available. It's 1-octave organ. It is older. It plays. It'd be a good starter organ for somebody, but Reverend Sue said she didn't want it, and there were 3 other people that I contacted, and nobody was interested in it. So maybe if we could find out what they're looking for, and we could do a better job of having it available, because, assuming just doesn't seem to.
No,
to
and
work
it's a
on it.
guess, certainly
I mean,
is.
you could, to that thought process, you could have a little area set aside, right, where you picked out the stuff that the charity needed, and they got, priority over,
Right.
everything else.
Right, and that, and again, you run the issue, well, this is a Grosse event, okay, the Grosse residents and citizens should have the first opportunity if there's
Yeah.
this kind of a, it's not even a swap meet, it's a take meet, so it's like,
Of course, then on the argument side of that,
Yep.
in my brain says that, if I was running a charity and I knew it was going on, and I knew my people needed something, I would expect them to be there,
Yeah, right.
done, right? I
Right,
would give
oh
them
yeah,
information
absolutely,
and-
yes, yeah,
So, you could argue at both sides. I don't know.
no, I hear you, but yes, but we still want to do a good job and keep up the good work in that. But again, thank you all for your good work on that day, and great program for us. Carl, you want to talk a little bit about the Eagle Scout project, or at least the tentative?
Yeah, we have looked at the thoroughfare canal access and have walked back there. I know Ray and Bill, Supervisor Budney, and Township Manager Thiel and I have walked back there. And I presented as a potential project to the Boy Scouts the idea of doing a trail with an overlook access on the canal, that area being the grubbed out area that is south of Lowry on the west side of Meridian. It's about 600 feet from Meridian down to the water access that we looked at. Presented that as an idea to the scouts, and I had a Boy Scout step forward and say that he was interested. Bill and I had the pleasure of meeting with him and his father in their home, and he indicated he was very interested in going forward with the project. He is going to do some drawings, some plans, give us some kind of an idea as to what he's going to require in terms of materials. There is already some gravel that has been placed down there, so we would have a good base. There's going to be a van coming back there, a truck that's going to video cam the sewer that has a manhole there that's going to be rebuilt, and that'll be done this summer. And I've indicated that Bill and I should take him over to the township and introduce him to the township manager, Derek Thiel, who oversees those projects, as well as the people in the building department at community development now that are going to be working with him and talk about plans and what he needs and permits, if any. And he seemed really excited about it. And Bill and I met with the young man and his father for an hour, and I think we both walked out of there feeling quite a bit of energy and a good way to do something on the cheap there. There is the possibility that he would be able to build an overlook there at the water's edge, as opposed to a dock out into the water that would be subject to ice floating down the canal in the winter and spring thaw, and you need trees and logs and things like that. So we're looking at a platform that would be literally right on the water's edge, and we have several opportunities for him to come up with ideas. and suggested that he might want to try and look online and see if there was anything available, or in some of the old magazines where there is an ability to borrow plans, buy plans or whatever. He understands he's going to be looking for finance on this, and that means he'll be going to various community foundations, and hopefully one of the local lumber yards will be able to sell him some materials at cost. But he was pretty excited about it. Bill, I think that's a fair statement. What do you think?
Oh, yes. Yeah, he's at that stage where if he's planning his Eagle Scout, and it generally needs to be done within a year, so he has to get on it and draw up the plans and submit it, obviously, to the township and to this committee, and make a presentation to us, and then go from there. And so, but again, I think it's a good opportunity for him to do that, and it's mutually beneficial at that point. We do know, and we certainly directed him to the Grossville Educational Foundation, which supports not just the schools but also the community, and have supported Eagle Scout projects, particularly like on Hennepin Point, the north end of the island. So there may be an opportunity for him to not only complete his project plans, but also submit a grant to the Educational Foundation, and that may be helpful in that regard and help him out. So,
Well, and Derek Thiel may be able to point him to some grant writing as well, which would be an excellent experience. But that remains to be seen. One little grin that we had was we asked him how long he had to do his Eagle Scout project, and he says, well, it has to be done by the time I'm 18. And we asked him how old he was, and he said about 14
right.
and a half, Phil.
Yeah, so he's young.
So we told
That's
him we'd
good.
like to see it done a little sooner than
A little
that.
sooner.
But he's very fired up, and we suggested that once school is out and he has a little bit of time, that we could take him down to the township hall and introduce him to all of those people that he's going to be working with. Good experience.
Very good. Good. Anything else on the opportunity there? The issue of first off, and I can take this up out of order, that, the Ferry Gauge Trail will be, there will be a grand opening, but as part of the, I think the original sale of the property from the Tittle family, there was certain parameters that had to be met eventually in order to satisfy the terms of the contract. And Carl, I'll defer to you again about the natural barriers that perhaps need to be involved in that. So why don't you?
The original, I'm sorry.
Tell me, what is the Tittle property?
The Tittle property was the piece of property that the township now owns, and that a trail has been placed on that runs from Ferry generally north about 750 feet, and then bends northwest and reconnects with a trail that goes over to Gage, as well as a trail that parallels Ferry Road that is primarily created by, pedestrians are using it now, but was originally probably by the deer and some of the wildlife back there walking along the drain. It is probably, I think it's about 6 houses east of Lowry, and Mr. Tittle and his wife lived in the back. There's 3 houses, 2 of which are along the frontage on Ferry. The third house goes deep into the woods, and that was the Tittle home. And immediately to the east of the Tittle home, there was a lot that's approximately 80 feet wide and goes back about 800 feet. And Mr. Tittle had offered to sell that to the township to replace the trail between Ferry and Gage that was closed when 2 homes were built on that property. That property was the subject of a trust, and my understanding is the grantor with the trust offered right of first refusal to close friends, and it never came up to a public sale, and the township was never advised or even learned that that property was to be sold until after the fact. So the two homes there now are north of Lowry, almost directly north. You'll see a drive there, and they face east onto the canal, and the original trail went within about 3 or 4 feet of the garage. And the people that are living now are big fans of open space. They love Grosse Ile, and they moved here for that reason, but at the end of the day decided that 3 feet, 4 feet from your garage was just a little too close. So that was closed, and we then had to find a new way, if possible, to access Gage and Ferry Road in order to complete that link so that people could reconnect to the bike path either at the foot of Lowry and Meridian or take Lowry to Meridian or Ferry to Meridian. Bottom line was the township approved the purchase of the current property. Mr. Tittle had requested that if it becomes an issue, because the trail is, it's not 3 or 4 feet from his home, but he was requesting some kind of green screen vegetation, arborvitae or something like that, that would allow the east portion of his home some privacy from people that were using the trail. And Mr. Tittle has unfortunately since passed. The deal was closed, and there is a commitment that we would go ahead and provide that screen if requested. And it is my understanding that Mr. Tittle's widow is contemplating some kind of a green barrier there so that they have some privacy, but she's not sure what and what she wants to do yet. So that is on the radar, but we don't have anything firm in terms of even recommended plantings or where they would be or how we would even begin to accomplish what she wants. And I'm not sure she has specified exactly what she wants other than to be able to enjoy looking out the east side of her house and have that somewhat screened for privacy. I think that's a fair statement of where we are.
So the screening would be on open space property?
Correct. And unless she wants to put it on hers, which would be all right. But again, we're not even, when I say a screen, I don't mean a fence or a wall or anything like that, but your traditional shrubs and
Natural
bushes
barrier,
and
right.
a natural screen that would give her some privacy. But
Yeah, I'm familiar with that area, but it's pretty heavily canopied. It's forested, so I think it would be difficult for any kind of shrub or bush or to survive there because there's going to be a relative lack of light good portion of the year. So that's going to present quite a challenge to figure out how to do that.
Do we know the footage, like what we're looking at? Like, so we have to cover, it's one thing if you got to cover 20 feet. It's another thing if you got to cover 200. So, that's a concern.
2 points at this juncture. We do not know what exactly she's expecting or hoping for, and I think it would behoove her to make some kind of a decision. Do you want it on your property? Do you want it on Greenways open space? The second point is that I would seriously recommend and will, when the time comes, that she contact a landscaper. We have several on Grosse Ile, and see what they would recommend. I have used the recommendations of one landscaper. I'm not going to mention any names, but they have done a terrific job in terms of suggesting you might want to plant this here and don't plant this there because, as Mr. Geist has noted, different plants thrive in different areas, and I probably kill half as many as I plant. So it's an accident when we get it right, but I think she would be well-versed to go ahead, or well-advised to go ahead and speak with a landscaper and get an idea what she wants, maybe make it look a little more natural as opposed to putting arborvitae out there and just hoping for the best.
So I just have another question. In the original sale, was this stipulated in the sale?
That was part of the sale. That was one of the conditions for the purchase, would be that if there was a need for a vegetation screen, that we would do that. I don't recall what the exact language was, but that is certainly an obligation that should be met. That was part of the transaction, and unfortunately, Mr. Tittle's not here to enjoy it, but I understand that she is very, very good person and would be interested in trying to figure out what the best is to protect her privacy.
I know we have an action item here, and I think we can come up with a solution of how we want to handle the action item at this point in time too. But any further information or any further discussion on the Tittle property?
Well, I would think that if it's a condition of the sale, you want to resolve it sooner than later. Because
Right.
you certainly don't want, a stipulation hanging out there.
Right, to be dragging on, you're right, exactly. And do we know, like, how long ago the Tittle property was purchased? It's been a while.
I believe it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Right.
Certainly not much longer than
No.
that or much less.
Thank you.
And there have been no complaints by Ms. Tittle about any of the use of the property. But we do have an issue, which is item number 5 from another neighbor to the property.
We'll talk to that.
We'll deal
Speak
with
to
that.
Good. As probably everybody knows, the thoroughfare bridge has been closed and is under repair. And along the work that's being done is that they have removed the bike bridges that have been adjacent to the thoroughfare, the main road bridge, and so as a consequence, I believe they're still sitting at the side of the area that the work area here. One of the things that Carl and I think Supervisor Budney is that if we could repurpose those, because at our last meeting we proposed to the township board two items. Okay, number one that we voted on as action items. Number one, we were looking to conduct some sort of a hydrological study in order to scientifically manage or intelligently manage the wetlands area, the vernal wetlands in the Meridian Woods, and the issues that we always have with the flooding and over the trails. So we're looking at a way to solve that problem in two major areas. There are certainly the east-west main path that's there, but then there's a much larger north-south area at the connector, if you would. So if it's like a big 9, it's part of the bottom part of the 9, which is floods quite extensively in that point. So the thought perhaps would be to, if possible and if feasible, to contact certainly the township engineers, and if they didn't know, they certainly could refer us to an environmental engineering firm. But I received an email from Supervisor Budney that says, well, let's hold off on number one, the study. Let's see, we may not need it if we can get another, may not have to do a full impact study on that. The second part is that we were asking for access to the Lowry cutout area, the Lowry grubbed out area. And he said, that's not a problem. You just, figure out who owns what or what part. And again, my thought and indication is that we generally, the open space has the prime areas, okay, moving to the, as you move to the canal, you come in through township property and you go to the right. Those are lots or areas that are adjacent to the thoroughfare canal that are open space, and it opens up into a beach area almost. If you go south, that's generally more. There's a couple of 4 lots in there that are township property. So, again, that's the issue. So the question becomes whether or not what we can do, and the feasibility of moving those bridges or getting those bridges into the Meridian Woods and help us traverse. So rather than just scuttle them in that, and I think Wayne County has approved. Said they're yours. I mean, you can have them. It's just a question of we have to figure out, okay, is that a good use, and can we repurpose them? So, any,
One of the big issue isn't location, but getting them to the location.
yeah,
Those segments, while they're in very, very good shape and have been well maintained, consist of sections that are 19 feet long and approximately 10 feet wide. The beams that they sit on are laminate beams that appear to me to be about 16 inches tall. And those beams are designed under federal standards to carry quite heavy loads from small vehicles that could be used to clean off the bridge, to maintain the bridge, or access. In short, they are heavy. They are very heavy. The contractor has indicated a willingness to load them onto a trailer, and we could then bring them either down to the airport or to try and place them in the open space. Once we have approval, hopefully tonight from this committee, I am going to be speaking with the township manager on Thursday and see what we can do. The idea somebody had was we could lift them with a forklift. I don't know if there's a forklift large enough to do that. And placing them in an area that would allow us to go above as opposed to through sensitive areas would be certainly very, very desirable in some respects. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to place them about a quarter of a mile inside an area, or maybe even a little bit longer, and have them set up and used so that we can enjoy a life of 25 or 40 years or more. But that is a problem if that passes tonight. With support from this committee, I'd be prepared to move forward and see what we can do about that. But I would like to get it done because while nobody is going to steal those things, at some point they're going to be sent out for either demolition or some other kind of removal and be denied to us. And it's a shame because those are really well built. And at 19 feet long, we have 5 of them. That's about
Wow.
95 feet. So you'd have a real chance to do something there that is different, unique, and frankly just appealing. Bill and I did walk back there with the township supervisor, and Mr. Budney looked at it and believe that he fully supports the project. It's just the logistics. How do you get from the side of Meridian Road to someplace where they can be of some benefit without getting hurt or trying to do it without doing any damage to the area.
A couple of thoughts come to mind related to that. Is that first, I agree that we probably should take ownership of them, relocate them someplace here in township property so that they're protected till we know exactly how we're going to deal with it. I think also you could also cut down those 19-foot sections and then reattach them once they're moved to site, so we could probably manage some of that logistics a little bit easier from that standpoint. The one thought I have is you said they're 10 feet wide. There might be a challenge getting in there because there are some sections of that trail that aren't 10 feet wide, and snaking it through there might be a challenge. But that's something that we can evaluate and determine how best to approach that, and obviously with the help of the engineers and that to set that up. But first thing, I think I agree. Let's get them from where they are, get them safely someplace, and then at least we know what we have, and if it turns out we can't use them, then they can always be disposed of later. But yeah,
there's always dump the junk.
Well,
we have extra.
if for some reason it doesn't work for us, the Gibraltar Bay Wildlife may have some use for them, and that's a little more open. But this is not a committee of one, and I wanted everybody's input before we attempted any kind of a project like this and do anything with that kind of effort with open space, and we'd just like to have your support on that so we can at least explore it, and we can all start working out and lift these bridge sections if we work out enough. But they are heavy.
I have one other question about that, is that if, you know, part of the engineering process is that you're gonna have to sink some pier buttresses to, in order for them to sit on and sit above the, you know, you can't very well just put them on the trail, okay, because they'll get weight. Guess what? Heavy or not, Mother Nature will take care of that, and they'll shift and they'll move. So one of the things, and I think that was always been our concern, is that if we're going to do it, we want to do it, we might need to be sensitive to the, you know, state protected vernal wetlands that we're involved with. So, but again, I would entertain a motion to direct Carl to speak to the powers that be to obviously move forward with this possible project.
So move.
Second.
Second by Ms. Weeks. Any further discussion?
I would think that you, in the marshland, you're gonna have to go down to solid soil, so you're gonna have to probably pier it, and I would think that the stanchions you would need for that would be relatively small in terms of disturbance of wetlands. That would also drive you towards leaving them long, because you would need less stanchions at that point. So you have all the expert companies here on the island that do that kind of work. So in terms of pulling them in there, I mean, you put them on a skid and drag them in would be just, you know, easy to do. I don't know. I don't see it as a big deal, personally.
Like I said, I think we're gonna need some engineering
Oh, yeah.
assistance to
Oh,
know
absolutely.
exactly how we're gonna put whatever footings
agree.
in that to
Yeah.
make sure it's stable.
The nice thing is, Theresa noted, we do have a lot of people, some people here that would be able to have some input in that and make it easy. This idea came to me at about 3 o'clock in the morning when I was mulling over some projects that I've been working on, and thought, gosh, we've got these sections down there, and there's going to be a total of 5 altogether. So whether we can use 1, 3, or all 5, or some other number, I think it would be very good, and I'll keep Bill posted on us. If you don't mind, Bill, we could work on this together.
Absolutely.
And
I'm not averse to any of that.
I
you
mean,
know.
if we don't use them all against the lowland, it'd be nice to use one across the crook there.
well, in fact,
Right.
that is an excellent point. I wasn't going to tread on that, but when Bill and I and Mr. Budney were back there, that area already is, it has a traverse. I wouldn't call it a bridge, but some pieces of trees of all different sizes where you can walk across it if you have good insurance coverage, because it looks like it's just waiting to fall and somebody's
I
going to get
mean,
hurt.
we mentioned that
Oh, you're right.
as being a problem, right? Is
If we can
you do
put-
see kids go across that in the
If we can
wintertime.
put one
Right.
of those sections out there, I think that would make a difference. And when you're looking at a 4 or 5 foot drop,
Yeah.
that's significant. If we can use one of these sections, opens up a lot of opportunities, and it certainly is much safer than trying to straddle a couple logs that are in poor shape to begin with, and let somebody, try that. And I just don't want to see anybody injured back there. I'd
No.
rather do this.
No.
And the depth or the width on that is, we guesstimated around 16 feet. So the span would
Would fit.
easily cover
Would
that,
fit.
and that would be an excellent way, Teresa, of handling that.
So we have a motion to move this project forward in discussion with the engineering firm and with the township manager. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good. Motion passes. As is many times the case, okay, is that for the most part, we're doing a really good job, and then the citizens are doing a great job in terms of policing and taking a good care of the trails that we have through our open space. However, there's always a few miscreants that generally do not follow the rules and think that, you know, it's for their own personal use and good, okay? Enjoyment, yes, but, you know, destruction, no. So I know on the Ferry Gauge Trail particularly, there have been some concerns about people using them after hours or at dark and during the dark, and going in there, having a party, or doing as many times people are wont to do. And I'm not going to just blame young people, okay? But you know, individuals do that. That certainly was an issue, and looked to be an issue in the Meridian Woods as we were going through there. There's been some vandalism, and there's been some debris, and that makeshift bridge over the ditch there is you know, we're not just playing cowboys and Indians, or we're not just playing in the woods. It looks like we're doing something a little nefarious, to say the least. So you want to speak to that?
Yeah,
now?
this came to me as a result of a complaint from someone who lives near one of the open space areas, and they have children and family time that they like to use, particularly during the summer. And the idea of having people running around in open space, sometimes loud, sometimes apparently with alcohol and things like that, and there is no ordinance that prevents somebody from engaging in loud activities and things like that. So it was suggested that perhaps we could have a dusk to dawn curfew, that when the sun sets, the area is closed, and then when the sun rises, depending upon the time of year, feel free to go back and enjoy nature. I think part of what we do with open space greenways Greenways open space is to be a good neighbor. And I like the idea of being able to continue that. And if that means that you can only use the areas during dawn to dusk, it seems to make sense. I don't know that there's an awful lot of good things that happen in the dark when you're outside. And again, whether it's people that are older or younger, neighbors are entitled to quiet, useful possession and enjoyment of their homes and the yards. So what I would propose would be some recommendation from this committee, whether we do it dawn to dusk or an hour before dawn until an hour after dusk or something like that. But like everything, it seems like in life we have what would be known as a rule of reason, and what is a reasonable person going to use and enjoy. And do you want somebody out there at midnight, going past your house or using the area? I don't think much good happens after dark, but whatever this committee would recommend, I'd take to the board and see if we could get an ordinance that at least makes it enforceable. Discretion being the better part of public safety and awareness, but not interested in just busting people for being too loud or anything like that. Sometimes just a warning is enough so that we don't do that again. But again, the whole idea with being able to do this is part of being a good neighbor. So
You mentioned that there's no ordinance. You mentioned there's no ordinance, but I'm wondering if that's really the case, because it is township property in that. But one thing is that on some of the, or several of the Nature and Land Conservancy properties.
excuse me. Go ahead.
Is that there are signs up there that has a list of requirements. And I think one of them is dawn to dusk. and it gives also a listing of a number of things you can do, and more importantly, things you can't do there. So that, if we simulated something similar to that, but they're doing it under some kind of agreement with the township already, so that's why I'm wondering, do we need to do something special or beyond what they're doing in terms of notification, how you use the the
Right.
area?
Part of the issue with any kind of ordinance is that, so you're gonna say, all right, you can't be in there before dawn, you can't be there after dusk or whatever, okay. Either way, is that you have to enforce it. So that means a neighbor or somebody has to call the police, and the police then, would have to respond to the call one way or another. Part of the issue, I think, becomes the practicality of the fact that, last I checked, our police may not have the wherewithal to be running through the woods chasing after a bunch of kids, as an example, to have an ordinance for curfew violation. So, like many things, if it's not enforceable, the question here is we can, and that's where we're at right now. I think there's a suggestion to be responsible in terms of the use of open space and greenways, but whether or not people respond appropriately is another story. The other thing is, I know, and Theresa may be aware of this too, is that a lot of times, whether it's in the winter or the fall or whatever time of year, you do have bikers. We have night bikers that come through and that use the trail at night, and all they're doing is riding their bike through the trails. Albeit it's dark, okay, and it's they've got their light, and I don't know. It's they're obviously trying to be daredevils, or that might be the thrill of the ride, but it's also a concern. Now, if you had a dawn to dusk, are we gonna ticket all the 10 bikers that go through Meridian Woods, and the police are gonna be waiting for them? I mean, I don't know.
Well,
that gets me.
what option or solution do you propose then? I mean,
Well,
you're saying not do anything?
No. It's not so simple as, okay, we're going to pass an ordinance, and you can't do that. First off, we can recommend that from this committee, but
Right.
then it's up to the township board. And again, I think there have been discussions. Let me use for example at Sunrise Park. There's rules and regulations for that, and if you simply put a chain up and say, can only be used certain months of the year, and people choose to use it, I mean, I don't know if that's ever been enforced, or there's no ordinance that says so what are you going to do? I mean,
I'm not sure this rises to the level of an ordinance, because I think there are ordinances already on the books that covers this. But if you don't establish or identify what the expected rules or regulations are for utilization of it, then you can't expect people to
Right.
to honor that in any case.
I understand that.
Now, I understand what you're saying, the practicality of being able to track down all the scofflaws and all that stuff. But if you don't establish any rules, you can't enforce anything under any circumstance, basically. In
Right.
that. So I'm just wondering whether you put signage up at the beginning of it. These are the things. It's a dawn and dusk, and as much as
Right.
anything, that's a safety issue for
Yes.
them as much as
Right.
as
And I do
anything.
know, for example, if you go to the nature area, or if it's a dawn to dusk area that we have, at the south end of the island, or if you go to the wildlife preserve in Humbug Marsh area, I mean, it's very clear there. It's a dawn to dusk operation. Okay, so. So, should this committee recommend to the township board at least for the appropriate use of open space trails, a dawn to dusk recommendation, whether it's an ordinance or not? That's the issue.
I-
I mean,
I personally think that's a reasonable expectation.
Reese, what do you?
Well, I mean, I feel like you should be consistent with the Greenways, property. I mean, no one's going to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on open space and not Greenways," when a lot of them are next to each other. And so, I mean, the reality is they kind of got to go together. The other reality is the kind of activity you're talking about isn't going to be stopped by having rules that says dawn to dusk, and you still need to address the issue. So, which is going to require, someone to go in the
And
woods
we're
in the
not,
middle of the night.
you had to step out, but I mean, the general consensus, it seems to be like, yeah, we do need some sort of a dawn to dusk, whether it rises to a level of an ordinance or not.
Yeah, and nobody is interested, certainly, I've never heard of anything within the department to go ahead and make it difficult for people to enjoy it or to give them any kind of a criminal record. We're not looking for that. I think it's just part of being a good neighbor. And in so many instances, we have found that you just simply sit down and talk with somebody and say, look, this is not something, because we get complaints or there's issues, and it goes away.
I mean, and here's the other reality to it, okay? I mean, if you have, let's just use as an example, high school kids who are underage drinking in the woods, well, that's, first off, that's against the law, okay? And, and the police should be called. And if they're causing such a disturbance in that, then they need to, and, the great question is, where are the parents in this matter? But that's another story. But again, I think that should be, something that we need to be aware of.
Well, and I think some of it too, to go in a different direction on that, we see bicyclists all the time, and if somebody is going to use the trail at 10 o'clock at night in May or September, and they have the helmet light on, it doesn't take much for somebody to get hurt going through there at night on a bicycle. And I think some of that is just having an ability to say, don't do that. And we have an ordinance, so let's not do it, and take care of business and do something during the day. I don't know that we could sit here all night long and come up with a number of different scenarios and probably not match humanity's ability to be inventive in terms of getting hurt and things like that. But I'd like to see safe use of the trails. And I don't know that, given how dark they are at night, that there is a way to do that.
I can provide a picture list of some signage that the land conservancies have, some of theirs that kind of outlines what the expectations are.
I'd like
in
to
that.
see that.
And we can, model it to be consistent with that and make any modifications unique to the particular area that we want.
So we don't necessarily need, here's the other thing, we don't necessarily need the township board in order to approve something like that.
I wouldn't think so.
I
It
don't
should
think
be
so.
under our
Should
control.
be under
wouldn't you
our
think?
purview.
I'll just run that by Derek Thiel
Exactly.
and get his opinion. So
Okay,
just looking for some support on that. If
right.
Absolutely.
and the simpler and the easier, the better.
Good. Anything else? Okay. Well, this Saturday, June 10th, at 10.
Bill, let me interrupt for a second. Do we have a consensus then on that to move forward with some kind of dawn to dusk then?
We need a formal motion? Or?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Well, do we? We're going to discuss it.
It's going to be a recommendation. If we're going to be recommending something, I think it has a little more support with a
Well, we're going to recommend more than just a dawn to dusk. So I'm just wondering, do we want to wait and, we can move in the discussion forward, but the recommendation, what we want, should we look and evaluate what we want to include in terms of a signage or notification for people utilizing the trail.
I think it'd be very easy with a recommendation or a motion here to approach the township manager and approach council and say, what do you recommend here? Because we want to have safe use and that.
Right.
So if we can have just simply a motion to bring that forward to consideration of the manager and the legal counsel and await their recommendation for the board, I think that'd be an easy way of doing it, since we're not going to be meeting in July and August.
Right.
So moved.
Okay, so let's be clear what we're moving on. Okay, so we are recommending a dawn to dusk hour limit, or however you want to describe it. Use limit, yes, to the open space trails.
We want to say trails or open space?
Or open
Greenways,
space,
open
period.
space.
Yeah, you're right. Just the open space areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's the dawn to dusk use limit, as well as, ramifications to, legal ramifications to other restrictions
Or requirements.
requirements that we may feel fit. So we need to know what leeway is first, and then, along the lines of matching the Nature and Land Conservatory limitations.
Right.
So there's consistency.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Geist. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to recommend the limiting use of open space areas from dawn to dusk and subsequent posting of rules and regulations, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So yes, if you could bring that to Derek Thiel and have that discussion, that would be fine. And then Ray, if you have those, you can forward it to us, or we can also look at other entities that do have that kind of dawn to dusk. Because ultimately, here's the other, I'll just make a comment. Ultimately, there is I would imagine, a liability issue that if I'm riding my bike at 10 o'clock in the middle, and I get hurt or I run into, I got to believe there's going to be some sort of issue with that.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so on this coming Saturday, June 10th at 10 o'clock, there will be a ribbon cutting ceremony at the Ferry Gauge Trail grand opening. It's been open, it's been used. And again, rather than to move it to two different venues, we'll also lump in with it the East River Connector, which has also been used, but there'll be like the grand opening for that area also. Cliff, I hope, will be there or be back from vacation, and because I certainly would like to, but we will look for, we've invited the community to attend, the Grosse Ile Nature and Land Conservancy, the members of the DPS who have been very helpful all throughout in preparing these trails, not only the Ferry Gauge Trail, but the East River Connector Trail to the Meridian Woods, and anybody else that wants to attend. And so we promised to keep it brief, and Mr. Geist said he would not have any lengthy speeches, so we will so we'll do that. But again, it'll be a great opportunity for people to go out and enjoy the trail and see what and for those youngsters who used to just cut from Ferry right across the gauge, you can't do that anymore. That's private property, and that's one of the reasons why we have this. But this has been a long time coming, more ways than one. There have been some logistical, not only just the acquisition of the property, but there's been some logistics to it that certainly are good. But it's the previous board has worked on this, and certainly we owe them a debt of gratitude in order for moving it to this point.
Do we I know we've talked about the ribbon cutting. Do you think it is best to do it on Ferry where there's limited parking, or we do it from Gage where there is?
I think the invitation
street.
went out that they could park on Lowry.
That was my
okay?
recollection.
And, you know, you could be dropped off or that. There's not a whole lot of room for you to park in that area. You know, you gotta get over like a pretty narrow little, over the ditch. I'd like to expand that somehow, but that's one thing at a time. But, however, if people wanna ride their bikes or they wanna walk and something like that, or park at Carl's house, that'd be fine. They could,
It'd be wonderful.
and then,
It's very reasonable.
you know, walk across.
Parking's very reasonable.
That's good. No, you're not charging.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Okay,
It's
all
just
right,
gonna be
okay.
reasonable.
I get it. All right, but anyway, we'll do what we can in that regard. Now, any further discussion items? Yes.
More of a question than a discussion item.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've, are coming up on the ribbon cutting ceremony and we get all that past us for the creation of the new trail, focusing on maintenance of the existing trails. I think you've given a directive to, or a quest to go out and survey each of the woods for this meeting. And so, I don't know if you want that in detail, but there's a significant amount of things that need to be done in the Centennial Farm woods to get that trail back in condition.
Right.
So, how do we go about doing that? Do we just get a hold of TNT, or do we walk through it with them, or how
What kind of things need to
what
be,
kind of formality do you want?
what kind of things need to be done to?
Well, there's probably 2 locations of the trail that need to have a small culvert put in, and then needs to be trimmed up. There's brush overgrowing the trail,
Right.
poison ivy, bushes, dead branches, so that it needs to be cut up, and then chips laid down. So it's a significant amount of chips that need to go in there. And then I guess the question is, who mows that wide section
Right,
there?
that's-
Is it the township, or is that continuing to go to be mowed, or?
Well,
What is that
that's
plan?
always a good question, because when TNT does it, I would say it gets to be a bit expensive, okay, to say the least. And one of the things that I was looking at just today too is, maybe we should, maybe this committee with our maintenance fund should purchase like a brush hog or some sort of a lawnmower, a wide enough lawnmower to kind of maintain, and that we have members of this committee that would certainly be able to do that. That
Doesn't the
could be.
township already have that
Okay,
equipment?
I gotta believe they do. I would think they would. Okay, but yeah, so I think what we need to do, and because here's the other piece, we're not gonna have a meeting in July or August, but by the same token, that doesn't mean we can't act on certain items, or, go out in the woods and meet and do that. And I would certainly not be adverse to doing that sooner than later. So if there's a time,
Well, you certainly want to do that kind of work when it's dry.
but I'm just saying, because right now it's prime dry, you know what I'm saying? I think maybe we should do that now. And Theresa, you already have, checked out that area, and so, from what you're telling us, this is something that, has a certain urgency to it, and we need to get
Well,
at
you've got to
it.
continue to use the trail.
Oh, yeah, which I think people want to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of new families on the neighborhood, and they want to go back into
Right.
that horse farm
Right, exactly.
in the play area
Right.
at Centennial Farm, and that's the route.
There
really isn't any cut across.
Maybe let's do it this way. Can you send us or send me an email, okay? And just identify, like, what you think needs to be done, and then we can talk to.
And what I would like to do then would be to follow up by maybe having Derek Thiel come out there and take a look at it and see what's possible with township equipment.
Right.
I know that in the past we have split some of the costs with equipment in order to keep certain bicycle path sections trimmed and that. So let me talk with him and see what he could do, and maybe we could take a walk out there and later in June.
Sure.
The equipment that's on the, that we're subsidizing with the open space was what? I don't remember now. Was it a chipper or what was it?
It was, gosh, that was probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. I think it had, some of it was the chipper, and there was another piece of equipment. I don't know that it was a brush hog, but I can find out from Derek where we are with that and
Right.
what we can do.
I mean, it's a pretty straight, you know,
Right, but it needs to be cleaned up, because right now is when
So-
even on the Meridian Woods Trail, there's parts that have the wood chips down, they're fine. Then you get the part where there isn't, then all of a sudden,
so
Mother-
who cuts Centennial Farm? Who cuts that? open?
nobody yet.
Part of the lease agreement, the Lutons take care of the portion, I believe, that they lease, which isn't the entire farm.
Right, I'm talking
You're
But-
talking
that
about
open
pathway,
area
right?
where the trees are that back up into that trail.
Yeah, that used to be rec when Gene was working there. I don't know whether they have somebody from rec assigned to that now that Kim is gone. But we can find out about that and,
Well, I mean, that would be the easiest thing to do. Who's ever cutting that just takes 2 or 3 swipes
Right.
down.
Yeah.
Because it's just a straight shot through there, and the rest should be chipped.
Right.
So it's easy peasy, you know, in terms of getting access to the farm, that trail
That
there. is
other,
what you use.
that heads out on Manchester, right?
yeah, if you could, I like the idea, if you could email that out, I can take it over to Derek. And maybe
Email
some
everyone.
kind of a map where you're talking about the, where the trail is and where you think it seems to need a lot of improvement or maintenance. I think
Yeah, it's
that
a
would be
pretty
great.
small trail, but, you know,
But-
it needs some attention.
But send an email to all, and, we can all do that, take a look at our
I'll put in
areas.
some pictures and we can decide what we want to do. and Get out there and meet, so
Good.
I didn't want to bring it up before we were finishing the other trails, but
No.
I would think now we got time to
Right.
do some basic maintenance.
And now's the time to do it too, because of the weather.
Right.
Um,
And we have chips.
Next item is our action item, at least number 1, the requests for natural barriers for the Tittle property. I would like to entertain a motion, or I will move, that we table this action until we find out more in terms of like what the natural barriers might be, if there's any consultation with a landscaper, if there are other possibilities that might be, possible solutions that might be better, or, or something of that nature. But at this point in time, we don't even know how long or how big or, what the scope of the project is gonna be. So I would recommend that we table that at this point in time.
I would support that.
Okay, support by Mr. Bloetscher. Any further discussion? All those in favor of tabling the request for the natural barriers for the Tittle property, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Our second action item is the recommendation to the Township Board of the appointment of the high school liaison for the 2003-2004 school year. Do I have a
23,
motion?
24.
Pardon me?
23.
23, 24, yes.
And 3 and 4.
Oh, sorry about that. Getting ahead of myself. Do I have a motion in that regard?
So move.
So moved by Mr. Geist,
Second.
second by Ms. Weeks. Any further discussion?
Quick question, what we've received here is a resume from the young lady. Do we know anything about that? Anything further?
Other than I spoke with a couple of teachers who do,
Okay.
who recommend, said, no, she would be a very able addition.
And we've done our due diligence.
Have done our due diligence.
Thank you.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstention? Any reports? Nothing from the schools yet, and hopefully we'll hear more certainly next year. I can tell you that there has been, I don't know if people are aware of this, that there has been a new principal that has been chosen by the Board of Education for Grosse High School. And Dr. Alan Carter will be the new principal, and I had the pleasure of working with him on the Grosse Educational Foundation, and certainly will continue to do so and try to deepen the bonds that we have with the Greenways open space. So we'll do that. Carl, anything anything else from the township?
No, I've covered everything previously. Thank you.
I'm owe Mandy Phillips an apology because I left she had a report from the Grosse Nature and Land Conservancy that is sitting on my printer. So as I left the house, it's called Sorry Mandy. But I do know on the 10th, I believe, or this coming weekend, so check the Grosse Nature and Land Conservancy website. They are having a spring walk through the woods. Obviously going to be a summer walk, late spring walk through the woods in the Meridian Woods, starting at 1 o'clock on either Saturday or Sunday. Pam is still on her world tour, and she's back, I understand, but we'd like to see her. And Theresa, you want to talk a little bit about the welcome letters?
We just got 50 packets that's going to go out, and we'll do another group of packets for the remainder of the year, probably in the December timeframe. So
So how many packets did you say again?
50. So I really don't see a need to go more than a couple times a year unless you want to do it, more frequently
I
than
think
that.
they did it monthly, but one of the issues they always had with that is that you could, people don't necessarily, just because they have acquired the property or the home,
It's
they
settled.
don't necessarily, they aren't there yet, okay? So,
Right. So the thought process was this gives you a little time to settle down, see what's going on,
Yes.
know your neighborhood, and then you might pay attention to the packet a little bit more.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
I'm thinking, June and January timeframe or something
Yep.
would be a couple things to do.
Teresa, what exactly is in the packets? And I've heard over the
So
years,
it's
the use of
the-
the letters, so.
Yeah, so it's the letter that we went over and approved in the map of all the trail system, the open space greenways pamphlet goes out with it.
The booklet.
Mm-hmm.
That I think we still have some copies that they are, and I know that Bert and Cliff are working on updating that, and not only that, but also the map of all the greenways, open space, and nature conservancy areas on the island. So those are being updated, because that's changed.
Right, so if they're not updated, if they're close to being updated in January, then we'll just
Yeah,
shift.
that would be, that's good.
But right now, we need to get some out, so.
Good, thank you, appreciate that. Public comment, this is the time. Please limit your speeches to 3 minutes or less. Hearing none, there are no public comment at this time. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Bloetscher, second by Ms. Weeks. Meeting is over at 8:24. What do you got? 8:22.
We keep